Hello, you're watching Talk On, the podcast of the Max Planck Institute for Social Anthropology in Halle, Germany. My name is Christoph Brumann.
And I'm Jovan Maud. And in this podcast, we're going to be talking about current research and debates in the field of social anthropology.
Today I have a special guest, Xiang Biao, who's one of our new directors, actually, who took over here 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Nearly 3 years ago.
Exactly. And and we will be talking about a book of yours that has recently been published, Self as Method, Thinking Through China and the World is the title. This is, in fact, it was a truly interesting read for me because, in the 3 years we've worked together, I've come to know your thinking quite well. Mm-hmm. But here there's a lot about what actually led you to that thinking, both biographically and in your previous academic experiences. And all of that was really very eye-opening for myself, I must say. Could we tell the audience a bit about the background of the book? How did it come about? It's kind of a special book because actually it's a series of interviews, right?
Yes. Yeah. So the idea originally came from the editor, Dan Li. And she, I think, has a PhD in social history, but then she became an editor in a publisher. And she approached me. She wanted me to write something that can link the kind of structural analysis with people's personal questions, personal existential difficulties, etc. And according to her view, not so many social scientists are good in writing that. And she read some of my articles and interviews, so she approached me. And I thought it's a good suggestion. And I do feel that young people in China, their education level is much higher than the parents' generation, and also social media, they are able and capable to read a lot, and they have lots of questions to be addressed. But it's true, we do not supply enough that kind of writing to them. But then it's also a challenge. I don't know how to write a research monograph in that way. So therefore, I suggested probably an interview would be a good format because I'm more flexible, and also I will be guided by someone who know what the young people are really worried about.
And that was this guy, Wu Qi.
Yes. Wu Qi is a journalist, and whom I did not know. And actually, Dan Li, the editor, knew him, and she approached him separately. And then we agreed. I think then we met in 2017 in Shanghai for the first time, and then started as a project.
Okay, but it seems you got along quite well because I think he asks really good questions, and he also thinks along quite well in the interviews, I would say. It's actually, I should say that these are actually 3 interviews, but we could say the transcripts of interviews that took place in 2018. The first one in Beijing, the next one in Oxford, where at the time you were a professor of social anthropology, and then the last one in Wenzhou. And so basically, how did you go about that? Did you have a plan for that, or did Wu Qi have a plan?
We had the plan, and Wu Qi sent me a very long list of questions in the very beginning. And then, as you said, the 3 clusters of interviews that are taking place in the 3 places. But in each place, actually, we talk many times. So it's a very long conversation. But there's a very good point that you made, and Wu Qi and I understand each other quite well. So therefore, it's a genuine conversation rather than an interview. It's more conversation than interview. And a couple words about Wu Qi may be relevant because he's almost exactly 10 years younger than me. And he graduated from the same university as me. And
so Beijing University.
Yes, so that's which means when I refer to something, he would understand in detail what I meant, like the difference between the 1980s, 1990s, and the 2000s.
Can see that.
And also the fact that he was a journalist, worked in various of, I think he started his career in Xinhua News Agency, and then he switched to a kind of quasi-private media, major media outlet. And then he became a publisher and a manager of a kind of cultural company, which means that he has a very broad view about what the young people are worried about, what is things being debated in the society. So therefore, his questions are really, you can say, quite representative of the social thought.
I also think, I mean, this is an English translation of the original Chinese book, and I also think that I can't really tell because the quality of the translation, but I think David Ownby, who translated it, also provided a commentary, and I think that was very helpful, at least to me. I mean, quite a bit of background, particularly about China details that, let's say, the reader not so familiar with China might otherwise be missing. I found that quite good.
I was very lucky that I have David to translate this into English. Again, it was David who approached me to do the translation.
That's what he writes.
He really did it for love. He did it for love. I mean, translation is very hard work. And he first of all translated part of the book into his blog series called China's Dream. And then he decided to translate the whole book. And David is a historian interested in Chinese intellectuals. And then he had worked with, according to himself, worked with a group of intellectuals who are kind of one generation older than me. So he became particularly interested in the generation of mine.
The follow-up generation in a way. Okay. That book has been, the Chinese version has been enormously successful in China. It has now sold over 200,000 copies. Okay, China's a large country, but still, I mean, that's many times the usual sales figures we anthropologists can expect. And I wonder why it is so successful. Do you think that has primarily to do with the fact that you kind of made it overseas? Became a professor in Oxford, one of the world's leading universities. Now you're here as the director of the Max Planck Institute. Do you think that's the primary explanation why Chinese readers are interested in this?
No, I think that would be a very minor point. I could easily imagine if I had still been in China now, if I wrote similar content, I think that would make it quite well received by the young readers. So I think it's primarily about the content rather than my status. But of course, my specific life history make it more richer and more bringing more diverse experiences by being in UK and etc. But I don't think it is the main reason.
I think what I also found in the book, or what I also found quite interesting, or what I imagine could be appealing to readers, is that you also relatively freely admit failures, weaknesses, difficult periods. When people like your first proposal you presented in Oxford was called outrageous by one of the professors, and you say in the book that's probably the first time this word has been used for a proposal in Oxford, and so on and so forth. I mean, that's probably also something that people might not expect, because they might believe you're a success story, and then you have all these difficult moments, etc., that you're also freely admitting to in the book. I think it might make you more approachable. What do you think?
It could be, I think, apart from making the book more approachable, apart from being kind of a surprise element, because people expect the success story rather than you kind of expose your failures. But I think the more serious point is that by exposing and by reflecting all the difficulties, the book shows that no matter how much you struggled, no matter how much or how little you achieved, your own experiences can always be very rich material to reflect on. So you can always turn failures or even very banal experiences into something interesting, if you pay enough attention, if you put it in certain context, you can always raise a question from that. I think this is why make people feel, I think the book is successful, as you asked. Part of the reason is that it make the reader think, or put it more precisely, make the reader feel confident to think, think through their experiences and think about their own experiences.
I think that like to connect thinking, to connect writing to experiences, I think is one of the recurring messages. As the main messages I would also take away from the book. I mean, the subtitle is Thinking Through China and the World. So you also sometimes go into, let's say, specifically Chinese ways or styles of thinking. And one of the figures that you kind of talk about is the Chinese Gentry. So the officials of the past who after a career in China, after a career in the capital, would come back to the local areas, or would stay in the regional areas all the time and have a very rich sense also of local experiences. So intellectuals, yes, but on the other hand, grounded in local life, grounded in actual experiences of what they're describing or what they're writing about. I think that's. I thought that's an interesting and in a way also anthropological take on things. And do you think this style of intellectualism still has a perspective today?
Oh, of course, I want to promote that.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I mean, if there's one keyword for the whole book, actually is about thinking. It's about thinking. And then the Gentry style of thinking is a specific way of thinking that I was exploring through the conversation. And basically, Gentry, you ask whether or not it's still relevant. It is. And I would say people like Isa Berlin, like Hannah Arendt, for me, is a kind of a Gentry style thinkers, even though it sounds a bit odd. Why? Because what does it do is in a very worldly manner to contemplate about life and communicate their thinking back to life, to people who are living their life. So it's the Gentry is the people who think in and about and for the community where the Gentry is living. So that kind of worldliness, yet its worldliness is not about the technical and the practical issues alone, but it's also a contemplation. It's a kind of your distance. You want to give a holistic picture. You want to give a view about life back to people. So you communicate that back to people. That is what I meant by Gentry.
So groundedness, basically, that you see in authors like Isaiah Berlin and Hannah Arendt. Right?
Grounded and yet distanced. You give a whole picture. Sometimes you're grounded, then become just the technical, give solutions, give policy suggestions. That is not Gentry do. Gentry is very the business to give meaning, and give meaning in a way that the people can adopt that meaning to guide their life.
I see. That leads me to the question, to one of another topics that is recurring in the book, the role of theory. But basically, you say quite provocative things, and I may even quote you. On page 67, you say that it doesn't matter whether the theory is new or old, deep or superficial, and especially right or wrong. The point of theory is to communicate something. And then you say to find language that resonates with the reader. So that's something that might sound provocative, at least to some social scientists who would probably say, well, theory first and foremost has to be accurate. And has to, what would you say if somebody would be approaching with such a criticism?
No, I agree. It is meant to be provocative. And it's not to say that it doesn't matter what the theory says. If we disagree with the theory, if we think we should reject the theory, and we should do that. And of course, the theory is meant to be debated about, right? But my point is that what is the main business for us? Is it to prove certain theories is wrong or inaccurate, or rather to focus on the social effect of a particular theory? So, for example, Orientalism. You can say it is a wrong theory.
Said's book.
But what is the point of Said's book? Said's book is not to say Orientalism is wrong. The whole point is to say why Orientalism, despite it's wrong, it is so powerful. So it is a real. So I think in his introduction chapter, now I can't remember. It's a prologue or introduction. He said, "I write this book mainly for third world intellectuals to show how knowledge is built on power relations." So the point is not just to say it's wrong or right, but is to unpack, to investigate how such wrong theory could be so powerful, and what is the relation between certain assumptions, discourses, and the real world power relations, the political economy, and etc. So it goes back to Foucault's idea, the regime of truth. So how that kind of circulation of certain ideas create a certain social effect. So this is what I meant. Just to say, oh, the theory is a statement, a certain statement is accurate or not, whether or not mirrors the reality as we see it. For me, it's a secondary. The more important that you treat the theory itself as a part of social practice. If you see certain social practice, you don't only say it's wrong or right. You can make a moral judgment, but more important that you have to investigate what is the motivation behind that. What is the method that the people use to carry out a certain social practice, and what is the effect, and how can this kind of thing be avoided in the future?
Oh, okay. Somewhat related, another page, actually page 150, you say social science is primarily about description. Describing things clearly is the greatest contribution. Again, that's a statement that some social scientists, anthropologists in particular, might take issue with. I mean, we've always prided ourselves of the depth and richness of our ethnographic descriptions, but nonetheless, many anthropologists would say, I mean, there has to come something on top of description, or is probably what you understand as description something else than people might associate with the word if it's heard at them?
Yeah, so what did Einstein do? Einstein gave us a description of the universe, but the way he described it, of course, different from what we see immediately as lay persons, but it's a description about how the world, the universe works, right? So all these physicists and scientists, what they do is kind of a description, and why social science should be different. So when I say a description is meant to be opposite to metaphysical speculation, right? But then, of course, we must describe things analytically, describe things in a way that will allow for, or sometimes even deliberately entice new questions coming out. You're constantly asked, why this will happen? Why this did not happen at that time?
So the why questions, the causal questions,
very important. But the why question must be embedded in the description. You ask why that person did not say that word at that moment. That's kind of why will lead you to a very deep and a very concrete next step, rather to say, oh, why do we have a thing such as society, right?
Okay. Yeah, that I guess is probably less controversial for most anthropologists. At least for me, that's what in my own humble efforts I'm also trying to realize, to the degree I succeed or... But that's a different question. The book in the subtitle mentions China, and that's, of course, an important topic because a lot of your thinking and writing actually is on China. And one thing that in this book you consistently try to debunk or try to deconstruct is what's called the China story or the China myth. The idea that China is something... China as a unit makes sense, and China is something that's consistent and coherent over time, and can be taken to explain, for example, the spectacular success of China in the last couple of decades or so. And that's something you don't agree with, right?
Exactly, yeah. And the reason I emphasize that is not an academic exercise to say, oh, we should deconstruct the categories such as China nation. More than that, I think one of the biggest problems that we are facing today in the world is that how to face a very simple mathematical question. That is, China will become the largest economy. Simply because they have so many people.
Sure.
And then you have people, the elite in the US, cannot accept this mathematical inevitability. And the president so simply cannot prepare the American people for that simple fact. But oddly, for many people in China, they cannot accept that mathematical fact either. Not because they don't think, okay, China will become number one. Of course, they think if China must and will become probably already number one. But they refuse to believe that it is a mathematical question. They want to say, oh, the rise is because of certain civilizational DNA, certain superiority in the system, and some mystical spirit, and etc. They all want to give some extra meaning, non-descriptive one, metaphysical meaning to that kind of, basically is quite a banal facts. But this banal fact itself has something fascinating to look into. How come so many people work together, build all this infrastructure, and also face lots of social problems, resolve some social problems, but create a new and etc. At this level, the China story is fascinating and can provide lots of lessons for the world, especially the global South. But if you wrap it up to say there's one single China story, and somehow then all the development is a manifest of a certain given civilizational DNA or some divine will, then I think it is a myth. And that is now not only a myth which is intellectually corrupt, but also become politically dangerous, actually become a practical burden for many people and enterprises in China. Because the world will look at you as a threat.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's, you say, if China is so, if China or something Chinese, the Chinese DNA, as you were just calling it, is the explanation for contemporary economic and political growth, what has China done the last 4,000 years, when it often was, of course, a dominant power, but also like 150 years back, definitely not as dominant and as leading in the world as it might in the future be.
So therefore the historical perspective is very important. I mean, I suppose that is relevant to our personal understanding too, whether or not we really treat the self as one entity, right? And always a progress from one stage to another. And that is also probably a dangerous way of thinking of
but
itself.
I'd see a little more organic unity or like organic boundedness in a person, in a self, than I would see in something as
of course
large and complex as China, as a nation or as a class or whatever you have. But but we probably can't pick a big fight on it. We probably much agree on this particular issue. There's one thing I thought, and is that you don't go too much into politics. Well, it's political in a broader sense, of course. If you say, if you analyze society and Chinese society, the way you analyze it, it has political implications, of course. But you don't go into the, let's say, into the details of particular Chinese regimes or leaders or something. And would you say it's a non-political book, or where would you place it in terms of, well, what it does for, let's say, a political understanding of the current world situation?
Yeah. And I think the book touches on about lots of geopolitics as a conventional understood.
That you do.
That's about the world order and how to understand where the world is going to. But it's true. The book is not about the politics with a
Yeah.
capital P, but I think the book is deeply political. And let's go back to the Gentry understanding of the political, especially articulated by Arendt. What is a political? Political is very much about communication. And so what is outside of a political is violence and raw coercion or raw power,
Yeah.
because they are mute. They don't need to talk, right? As they put a gun on your head and then it's finished. They don't need to persuade, they don't need to listen to what you say.
Okay.
So what is needed now is to develop discourses, develop languages that ordinary people can use, especially, my reader is relatively young and educated. They can express how they feel, they express their concerns. That itself, of course, is not political immediately, because these real concerns are often emerging from very practical issues in everyday life. But it is political because it is public. It will touch on questions such as how resources should be distributed and what kind of procedure is more just than others. So I think to build that kind of language is building a micro infrastructure for a more livable political condition.
Okay. Youth plays a special role in the book. You talk a lot about young people. And would probably raise two questions for me. Why do you think they're so important? And secondly, how do you actually get at what young people are thinking and feeling nowadays in China? What's methodologically? Well, how do you tap that? How do you approach that?
Yeah. Second question first. Thanks to the social media communication technologies, young people are really it's become a part. It's not only a way of communication; it is become part of their being. It's become a part of their life, and so therefore there is a huge amount of information available in social media where you can see very vividly and directly what do they think and feel. Many fragments, but you put enough fragments together, you do see
then
the
a
general
picture emerges. Yeah.
So of course I have lots of public conversations, dialogues with young people, partly because the traditional media also now are very keen to organize such a public discussions in order to have large followers and audience. So that infrastructure is there, right?
So they're tapping into the social media world, basically.
Yeah. So I think that ecosystem is really something that scholars should tap on. And then why I take them so seriously, and I think because they really they are the creator of a new world. This again go back to Arendt's notion of the natality. What is the essence of a human life?
Yeah.
The essence of a human life is a question of a beginning. There's always strangers come to our life. Who are the strangers? Young people. New life are constantly being born, and they always start a new life. No matter what you have said, what you have done, they will start a new life. And it's by this moment of the moment of a beginning, when they enter society, they start thinking lots of questions, and they demand answers, and they will take initiatives. And at that moment, we have the duty to tell them what happened before, and give them some choices, and especially give some tools, languages to them. So help them to make a new beginning.
That's a good one, actually. I never thought of it, but it's true. Like everyone starts out as a stranger.
Yes.
The stranger figure is important to anthropologists. There's this book, The Professional Stranger. I think. That's often. We put ourselves into situations where we are strangers, but. Like everyone has that experience of having started out as a stranger, even if retrospectively it's difficult to remember how that felt, right?
Yeah. And at that moment, they have new perspectives and they are very creative.
Yeah. But at the same time, what you say about Chinese youth is like, so there's a lot of melancholia, etc. I don't know whether you say that or Uti says that. I guess one of you brings it in. But anyway, so there's a lot of let's say sense in the contemporary Chinese youth that things aren't moving, things aren't going forward, or like you. I mean, that's what what I know you've also explored in other work, that kind of. The more you struggle, the more you tread the mill, the less the less you advance. That's is this book? Can this book be read as a kind of let's say also as a kind of corrective to that, or?
Yeah, but that was not a purpose, right? The book was not meant to be kind of self-help book to cheer you up. But definitely that is a very important part of their life, the sense of powerlessness, the sense of lost direction, confusion, and actually situation is becoming worse over last 2 years since the book was published.
Oh, okay.
And which also partly explains the popularity of the book, because in dark times people need more to read.
I see.
Yeah. So, and then the question is that how, this is another very important question scholars must to face. No matter what answer we give, what kind of explanation we give about a reality, the biggest question for people is that what can I do? You can tell me, there's a lot of inequalities, injustice, and you can critique it from theoretical point of view. Yes. But now I'm living inside of this unequal, unjust system, and I have to make a living. I have to survive. What is acceptable? What is not? How can I make a decision without knowing what the next step will lead to? With all kind of uncertainties, how can I make a ethical, moral judgment? So in a why self as a method? Self as a method, in a way, is to address as questions, to help people. It's not to become egoistic, but rather to use whatever is available to think about your living condition and make informed decision. So what is most available to yourself is your self-experiences.
I see, yeah. If imagine we had a fourth chapter in this book, and this is my final question actually, a chapter basically Wu Qi interviewing again now in Halle, what would that be about? Or what would you like to add yourself if you were able to kind of extend the book now?
Yeah, we're planning to do it.
Are you? Okay.
Yeah,
Didn't
because
know
the
that.
publisher is happy with sales and
Okay.
quite lively discussion that is a book.
It also, I should say, it also got downloaded more than 200,000 times in the English version already.
Yes.
It's open access, so everyone can download it for free.
Yeah.
Downloading doesn't mean reading, but let's assume there's a sizable proportion of readers, and that again is quite a bestseller, I would say.
We will probably talk about, of course, my experiences here in Halle, my reflection. And the key question is, what is knowledge for in the 21st century? What is social research for? And what kind of social research and thinking we should do? Number two, probably will reflect on COVID, because it's such a very complex issue. It is about very simple or biological life. It's a basic safety and security, but yet it touches on question of politics, emotion,
so
family relations.
Different
so people need
issues, migration, mobility.
Need the tools and need certain perspectives to think through such a complex issues. And thirdly, almost inevitably, of course, we'll talk about the world situation. Again, it was after the publication of the book that we witnessed such a dramatic shift, like the possible decoupling, so-called decoupling between China and the West, and how we should face that. Again, it's not about the geopolitics per se, but how an individual who can no way influence the geopolitical change, but will be inevitably being influenced by the changes. How can you live a life in this big shift?
I see. Well, Biao, that sounds like something to look forward to. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you all for listening. See and hear you next time to talk on.